It was the winter of 1920, a time when Europe was still shaking off the horrors of the Great War. My American socialite's parents decided to spend the season traveling through the Old World, indulging in Europe's finest luxuries. My father, Henry, had a fascination with the old continent, its architecture and its history. My mother, Beatrice, was always delighted in the grand balls and elite society of Europe. As their only child, I often indulge in their adventures, but this one felt different. It was colder, quieter, and the world seemed dimmer after the war, as though something had shifted in the very soul of the earth. We boarded the train in Vienna, a grand black steam engine called the Obsidian Express, bound for the distant reaches of Eastern Europe. It was a special train, an exclusive experience arranged by my father's wealth and connections. The journey was to take us through the snow-covered mountains and deep forests of Romania. Although the invitation had been peculiar, no known railway company, no clear destination, my father had laughed it off as part of the allure. I wasn't so sure. The platform was oddly deserted when we arrived. The train itself gleamed under the dull, overcast sky, its dark metal frame giving off an unsettling sheen. As we boarded, I felt an odd chill, though it wasn't from the snow swirling outside. Something about the train felt wrong. The interior, however, was magnificent. Gilded chandeliers, velvet seats, and rich mahogany wood. My mother, always a lover of luxury, was immediately taken by it. My father settled into a plush chair with a glass of whiskey, as though the unease I felt did not exist. But as we moved deeper into the train, the eerie sensation only grew. The first thing I noticed was the silence. Though the train was filled with passengers, men and women dressed in the finest clothes of the era, there was no sound of conversation, no laughter, no chatter. Each person sat stiffly in their seat, their eyes fixed forward, faces expressionless. My parents didn't seem to notice as we walked past, but I did. The passengers' skin was pale, too pale, and their clothes, while elegant, seemed faded, worn. A strange scent lingered in the air, like old wood and something faintly sweet, almost decayed. I leaned toward my father. "Do you notice anything strange about the other passengers?" I whispered, hoping he would see what I saw. He gave a dismissive chuckle. "Just quiet folk, I imagine. Not everyone is as lively as we Americans." But as the hours passed, my discomfort deepened. It wasn't just the passengers' stillness that unsettled me, it was their very presence. They didn't eat or drink. Their breaths seemed shallow, if they breathed at all. At one point, I caught the eye of a woman across the aisle. She was beautiful in a cold, statuesque way, and her eyes, they were wrong. Empty, lifeless, as though the soul behind them had long since left. When our gazes met, she smiled, a slow, eerie curl of her lips that sent a shiver down my spine. Unable to bear the suffocating silence any longer, I excused myself to explore the rest of the train. As I wandered down the narrow corridors, I passed more of these strange, lifeless passengers, all equally silent, equally lifeless. I moved further down the train, hoping to find the conductor, some explanation, anything to explain the chilling atmosphere that clung to every inch of this place. Eventually, I reached a door at the far end of the train that led to a different compartment, one that felt older, more decrepit than the luxurious ones we had been seated in. As I opened the door, a blast of freezing air hit me. The walls were no longer gilded, but covered in peeling paint, the windows cracked and frosted over. The scent of decay was stronger here, almost unbearable. I turned a corner, and there, in the dim light, I saw them. Bodies, motionless, piled on top of each other in narrow bunks, draped in what looked like funeral shrouds. Their faces, pale and sunken, stared upward, unseeing. The compartment reeked of death, the air thick with the cold stillness of a crypt. Suddenly, I understood. These weren't passengers. They were dead. I stumbled back, my heart racing, barely able to breathe as the realization sank in. The train was a vessel for the dead, a spectral journey across this frozen land. And we, my family and I, had boarded it without knowing. Panicking, I rushed back to find my parents. But when I reached the dining car, something had changed. My mother and father sat where I had left them, but now they too sat unnaturally still, their faces pale, eyes staring blankly ahead just like the other passengers. "Mother? Father," I whispered, shaking as I touched my mother's shoulder. Her skin was ice cold. She didn't respond. Neither did my father. Their once vibrant faces were now slack and expressionless, their skin losing its warmth and color. It was as if they had become part of the train, absorbed into the silent ranks of the dead. I backed away in horror, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The air in the train felt heavy and oppressive. I wanted to scream, to run, but my legs felt weak beneath me. Desperation clawed at my chest as I turned and bolted down the corridor, the walls of the train seeming to close in around me. I had to get off. I had to find a way to escape this cursed journey. I reached the door to the conductor's car, my hands trembling as I fumbled with the handle. Locked. I pounded on the door, shouting for help, for answers, but there was no response. The low, haunting whistle of the train was the only sound, a ghostly wail that seemed to mock my helplessness. With no other option, I forced the door open, splintering the old wood. Inside, the conductor's car was empty, except for a figure draped in a tattered black cloak hunched over the controls. His back was to me, his hands gripping the levers as though steering the train through some unseen realm. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice hoarse, fear threatening to consume me. "What is this place?" The figure didn't move at first, then slowly it turned its head, revealing a face gaunt and skeletal, eyes sunken deep into hollow sockets. His voice was a low rasp, like wind through a graveyard. "You boarded the train of the dead," he whispered. "The living have no place here." I took a step back, my heart hammering in my chest. "I don't know. My parents, they were still alive. You have to let us go." The conductor's empty eyes bore into me, and for a moment I thought I saw something. Pity, perhaps. Or was it indifference? His bony hand reached for a lever, but he paused. "The train only travels one way," he said. "Once you board, there is no return. But you..." His gaze shifted to me. "You still have a choice." "What choice?" I asked, my voice trembling. "To stay," he said simply, "or to jump." The words hit me like a cold wind. Jump into the freezing, endless night that rushed past outside the windows. It seemed like madness. But what choice did I have? If I stayed on the train, I would become like them, one of the silent dead, trapped forever in this spectral limbo. "I can't leave without my parents. They are already gone," the conductor said softly. "Their spirits now belong to the train. But you can still escape." I hesitated, the weight of my decision pressing down on me. But in my heart, I knew the truth. With a deep breath, I turned and ran back down the corridor, past the silent passengers, past the eerie whispers that began to fill the air. The windows of the train were frosted over, but I could see the dark, snowy landscape outside, rushing at an impossible speed. The night outside seemed endless, a void that stretched forever. I reached the door to the next car and threw it open. The icy wind howled, pulling at me as I stepped out onto the platform between the cars. Below, the tracks rattled and groaned, disappearing into the frozen darkness. I looked back one last time, at the train filled with shadows, at the life I had known slipping away. Then, with one final breath, I jumped. For a moment, there was nothing but cold and darkness, the wind tearing at my clothes as I fell. But then, suddenly, I hit the snow with a jarring thud, the cold seeping into my bones. The train's whistle echoed in the distance, growing fainter and fainter until it was gone, leaving only the sound of the wind. I lay there, dazed, my body aching from the fall. When I finally opened my eyes, I saw the night sky above me, stars glittering like tiny diamonds. The world was silent, but it was real, solid, grounded. I was alive. Shivering, I struggled to my feet, looking around at the endless, snow-covered landscape. There was no sign of the train, no sign of my parents. Just me, alone in the frozen wilderness. But I was free. As I began to walk, the weight of what I had lost settled on my shoulders. My parents, the life we had known, it was all gone, swallowed by the ghostly train. But I had escaped its grasp, though the memory of that eerie journey would haunt me forever. Somewhere out in the world, the Obsidian Express still traveled through the night, a train for the dead, lost between worlds. And I knew deep in my soul that it would always be searching for more passengers, more souls to claim on its endless journey through the shadows.